minutes. I would like to welcome everybody who is attending today, and that includes some donors, longtime supporters, team members, board members, past board members, advocates of the library, and a lot of other folks. Thank you so much for supporting our public library and for supporting it through the Seattle Public Library Foundation. I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. The public library is on indigenous land of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish. And we acknowledge this land with gratitude and hope that you will use the library in this place to study, to understand, to respect, and reflect. A few quick housekeeping items. We very much welcome questions for our guest today, Liz Camfiord. The best format to do that, you'll see a little question and answer box on your screen. And please use that, and I and staff members will be able to see those questions and ask them as we have some time in the end. I'm sorry you won't be able to do so directly to Liz. So I am excited now to introduce our guest, Liz Camfiord. She has worked at Penguin Random House for more than 25 years. She's joined us in the past to highlight some of the amazing new books that are coming down the pike, and we're thrilled to have her again with us today. Liz is also a graduate of Berkeley, where she got her English literature degree. And I can tell you, as a Stanford graduate, Berkeley is one of easily the 25 best places in the Bay Area to get your English literature degree. So I'm going to turn it over now to Liz. Welcome, and thank you for joining your many fans in Seattle today.
Here I come. Where am I?
You're here. We can hear you anyway.
Yeah, my camera is sensitive. Here I am. Thank you so much, Sam, for your gracious introduction and the foundation for all the amazing work you do. It's so inspiring to see all those slides about work you do for the freedom to read and all of the programs. So I love to be with you, and thank you everyone who's joining. I'm going to be talking about fiction and nonfiction, things that are available now, books that are available now, books that will be coming out even with some fall highlights. So I think there'll be something for everyone spanning the globe. And so let me just share my screen real quick and we'll get started. So for those of you who have joined in the past or just know about the Library Reads program through the library, this is a initiative of the American Library Association to get votes from librarians and library staff about their favorite books in any given month. So here are Penguin Random House's share of that list for July. Wonderful, a lot of genre fiction, so mysteries and romance, and just it's a really, if you're looking for a great read and you're a little stumped about what to read, just visit libraryreads.org and you can see what libraries favorite books are for that month. It's been running for a long time now, over 15 years. And so I encourage you to check that out and check them out. So some of these will be familiar to you because these are, amazing authors that we publish and have published. National Book Club picks, as in The Emperor of Gladness, which Oprah picked as for her book club. I think it was last month. If you read On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, you know what an incredible, brilliant writer Ocean Vuong is. He began as a poet. still a poet, and brings those poetic gifts and his storytelling gifts to his novels. And his most recent novel is The Emperor of Gladness. It's big-hearted. It's a novel about chosen family and unexpected friendship. It opens one late summer evening in the post-industrial town of East Gladness in Connecticut, where 19-year-old High is standing on the edge of a bridge in pelting rain, ready to jump. He hears someone shout across the river. The voice belongs to Grazina, an elderly widow with dementia who convinces him to become her caretaker. And so, over the course of a year, they develop this life-altering bond, one built on empathy, spiritual awakening, reckoning, heartbreak, and it's just transformative in High's life. So, this is everybody who's read this book thinks it's just remarkable. We're always, waiting with bated breath when there's such an amazing debut novel to see how that will transfer to the sophomore publication, and it's just been great. So it very much talks about the profound ways that love and labor and loneliness form the bedrock of American life. And as you already know, Ocean is a Vietnamese American. So his first novel was really written as a letter to his mother, who never learned how to read. And it was his coming out story. So if you haven't read him yet, pick up either of those books and his poetry. And it's also an Indie Next pick, which is independent bookstores all collectively vote also, like librarians do with library reads, on their favorite books of any given month. And so this was part of the Indie Next list as one of the favorites. And now we have Taylor Jenkins Reid. So another Indie Next pick. She is probably most famous for Daisy Jones and the Six, which was a really fun adaptation for the screen. This is her epic novel set against the backdrop of the 1980s space shuttle program. So physics and astronomy professor Joan Goodwin is our protagonist. She's been obsessed with the stars since she was a girl. And she comes across, but now she's content to teach at Rice University, teach astronomy, and she has a niece she has a great relationship with, and she's content until she comes across an advertisement seeking the first women scientists to join NASA's space shuttle program. So she is selected from a pool of thousands of applicants in the summer of 1980, and begins training at Houston's Johnson Space Center along with this exceptional group of candidates, men and women, who all become unlikely friends. And as they're preparing for their first flight, Joan falls in love. And then the story following history goes into December of 1984 on a mission where everything changes in an instant. So yes, library reads, Indie Next. She's a fabulous storyteller. She even wrote a book set in my town, Malibu Rising. And she's just a favorite. So encouraged that. I really loved this novel. I mean, I'm glad I have it in my present. Selected it because it's not necessarily a writer, it's a debut novelist, kind of a smaller publication in terms of publicity, but just a total gem. The Jennifer Trevelyan lives in New Zealand. She's a New Zealand writer, and this is a coming of age mystery. It's set during a summer vacation in 1985 on the coast of New Zealand, where the author did spend her summers as a child. So it follows 10-year-old narrator Alex. Alex is there with her family, her older sister, and her parents. They're all kind of fracturing. Her mother is trying to finish a novel. Her dad's a little bit absent. Her sister is just turning into a teenager. She's starting to experiment with sex and drinking and sneaking out at night. And there's a lot of loneliness that Alex feels, because she's always been close to her sister. And the author has said in interviews that this mirrors some feelings that she had when she was growing up about her own sister. So it's a family story, and it could just be that and be fantastic. It reminded me a little bit of Joyce Carol Oates' Smooth Talk. Maybe Ann Tyler fans would like this. But then there's this sort of underbelly because there is a missing girl in this town. And our main character, Alex, meets on the beach one day when she's just alone, a young boy, and he tells her about this missing girl, and they try to solve that mystery. So it's beautifully written, beautifully told, and it has, dark themes, a lot of 80s nostalgia, super atmospheric, and so there you go. Then I wanted to tell you about The Great Man. This is timed to the 100th anniversary of The Great Gatsby. Our author has masterfully reimagined the opulence and social dynamics of F. Scott Fitzgerald's classic, but it's the real world backdrop of LA's Sugar Hill, which is in LA, the West Adam Heights district, and it offers a really compelling examination of wealth and class. Sugar Hill was really pivotal in LA's civil rights movement, and it was marked by a historic court case where 8 white residents sought to evict their Black neighbors through restrictive covenants. So this narrative is a response to the omission and dehumanization of 3 African American characters in The Great Gatsby, and it draws inspiration from real life luminaries such as actresses Hattie McDonald, Lena Horne, the singer, who are also real characters in this book. So Davis Lurie crafts this narrative that celebrates really the brilliance of Black pioneers. And I was a big fan of the show, the British show Broadchurch, and Chris Chibnall was the creator of Broadchurch. So now he has come to write a detective novel. This also is set in sort of a quaint English village, Flitcombe, and the villagers like to think of it as one of the most picturesque spots on England's coast. But now it's a macabre crime scene because a man has been found dead tied to a chair in the middle of the road with a stag's antlers on his head. So it's a gruesome scene, and especially when the victim is identified as Jim Tiernan, who ran the White Hart pub. So his pub was the center of village life. He knew everyone's secrets. So we're introduced to Detective Nicola Bridge, who grew up in Fleetcombe and has now returned for the good of her family, and to help solve this mystery. She is paired with a young detective, Harry Ward. He's 10 years younger than she is, but despite his newcomer status, he's determined to earn her trust, and they really don't have long to crack this storybook facade of the town and find out just what the people of Fleetcombe have to hide. Oh, and one of our uh, most wonderful novelists, Michelle Hunivin, who unfortunately lost her house in the fire in Altadena, it has this new novel, Bug Hollow. She teaches writing here at UCLA, and she's written 5 really amazing novels, but this really, I think, is going to be her breakout novel. It's out now. It just came out. It chronicles the lives of middle-class Americans in her lushly conjured native California as they struggle with addiction, excruciating romances, and losses as they're continuing to just try to be good. So this is written about the Samuelson clan over 4 decades. And we're introduced to Sally Samuelson, who, when she was 8 years old, her golden boy brother Ellis went missing the summer he graduated high school. So Ellis finally turns up at the bucolic Bug Hollow, which is kind of a last gasp Northern California counterculture commune in the 1970s. He's found joy in this communal life there, but then died in a freak accident weeks later. So the whole family's world is rocked. Julia, Ellis's girlfriend, then shows up pregnant on the family's doorstep. So each member of the family has really sought their own solace, and we get to know them all really well in this wonderfully conceived novel. I just finished the audiobook of this and I absolutely love it. This is probably our youngest writer on the list, Layla Motley. She astounded people with her debut novel, Night Crawling, which was an Oprah pick. She wrote it when she was 17 years old. She understands the voices of teenagers, and this novel, that the Girls Who Grew Big, is about a group of teenagers who are mothers, who are pregnant, and their friendship and their life in this small town in Florida. It alternates between mainly three of the girls, and they all have separate situations, separate hopes and dreams, and rely on each other. Of course, there is a lot of heartbreak, but in the end, I will say it's about motherhood. Um, and I just, it's very special book. And also, it's just not really written about very often, even in fiction, about teen motherhood and not just kind of dismissing these young people for, some of their mistakes. Yeah, I love it. As I do this book. So this is a discovery. I love short fiction. I love poetry. And Fools for Love is by Helen Schulman. She's written other books. The title story and the title of the book come from Sam Shepard's play, A Fool for Love. So she's just writing about all manner of different kinds of love relationships. It's a funny, sexy collection, sometimes sad, they're surprising. Here's a sample of some of the kinds of stories that are in it. We've got a single American mother and a French Orthodox rabbi who fall in love over poetry, as she's just helping to dismantle a shuttered bookstore in Paris. We've got a rebellious young woman marrying a series of men who are all wrong for her. She proceeds to cheat on each one of them. Her widowed mother finds her deceased husband's sex diaries and decides she needs to make up for lost time. And it's just, it's set in the East Village, it's set in Paris, it goes everywhere, and it's about affairs of the heart. And I don't know if you've read Gary Steingart before, but he is one of our best satirical, but also poignant novelists. He's also written a memoir. So Vera or Faith is this bitingly funny tale of a family struggling to stay together in a country that's rapidly coming apart. It's told through the eyes of their wondrous 10-year-old daughter. I'm seeing some threads through the books I've chosen, with a nod to the Henry James classic, What Maisie Knew. So it's a classic story of parents, children, and also the dark ironies of a rapidly transforming society. In the novel, we meet the Bradford Shmulkin family, a very modern blend of Russian, Jewish, Korean, and New England WASP. They love one another deeply, but the pressures of life in an unstable America are fraying their bonds. The dad's a struggling, cash-thirsty editor whose Russian heritage gives him a surprising new currency in the upside-down world of 21st century geopolitics. His wife, Anne, mom, is progressive, underfunded blue blood from Boston who's barely holding the household together. And then they have their son, Dylan, whose blonde hair and Mayflower lineage provide him pride of place in the newly forming American political order. And above all, the young Vera, half Jewish, half Korean, and totally original character. So Karen Russell said of this novel, it's a novel you can read in one sitting that will stay with you forever. And so Gary was born in Leningrad in 1972, and he came to the United States 7 years later. And his novels really get to the center of, immigrant families and just America's issues and joys and all of that. He's won the National Jewish Book Award for fiction. He's just a superior writer. And then I have I think it's the current Good Morning America book club, called The Compound, where we meet Lily, who's a bored, beautiful 20-something, and she wakes up on a remote desert compound, alongside 19 other contestants in a reality show. They're competing to win luxury prizes, champagne, all sorts of things. But and Lily has really no desire to leave. The world outside is falling apart. This is a bubble, which is totally decadent and all of that. However, the producers of the show have something a little more sinister in mind, and the competition really intensifies. The intimacy between the players deepens. There are dangerous situations that amongst the challenges that they have to rise to. And Lily's trying to make it to the end to have her prizes and wildest dreams come true. But what will she do to have to win? There's already a film deal with Universal, and an Indie Next pick and all sorts of accolades coming for The Compound. And Pan. So this is a really interesting novel, on a lot of best of the summer anticipated summer read lists. Here again, we meet a pretty young protagonist, Nicholas. He's 15 years old and he forgets to breathe. The doctors say it's just panic, but he thinks his real problem might not be a psychiatric one. He thinks that the Greek god Pan is trapped inside his body. His best friend Ty and then his maybe girlfriend Sarah are hunting for answers why. So then it becomes this sort of intellectual detective story. Oscar Wilde features in Charles Baudelaire, Bach, rock and roll music, a drugged out barn scene. It's just a really imaginative coming of age novel. And our author, Michael Clune, is a Guggenheim Fellow, a literary scholar. He did write a memoir before this about heroin addiction called White Out, which was named one of New Yorker's Best of the Year. And he has a real cult leadership. So I think that might be the cover image might be part of like a Hieronymus Bosch painting. Not sure, but really a dazzling book. And then another short story collection that I really admire, and this is an oral history of Atlantis. So Ed Park has written some novels prior to this. In these stories, his characters bemoan their fleeting youth. They're focused on, meet cutes and breakups. They're writing book reviews, translating ancient glyphs, bidding on stuff online. It's very contemporary. And once in a while, they find solace in the sublime. It spans a quarter century, 16 stories telling the absurd truth about our lives. And I put a little excerpt from one of the stories there because I just think he's just a fantastic writer. And he was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. This is probably my favorite book in this for the summer. It's coming out next month. It's a debut novel from a Swedish author, and she has written a novel about an elderly widower who's living in a small house, kind of a cabin in the Swedish countryside. He's struggling to maintain autonomy over his life. He's really feels like his life is ending. He's doing a lot of reflecting. He's pretty crabby. His main social interactions are with his caretakers. The novel's interspersed with his caretakers' notes about, what he ate, when he showered, and all of that. He has one grown son and a granddaughter. His relationship with his granddaughter is very sweet and pure. His relationship with his son has always been tense. His sole companion, our main character, Bo, is his elk hound, Sixton, who he's, sleep, shares his time with and is so attached to. His son feels that his dad can no longer take care of Sixton and can't walk him properly and all of that, and wants to find a new home for Sixton. So that's kind of the tension in the story. But it's really, even though it's a sort of short novel, it is kind of like Claire Keegan's novels, where there's just so much there, so much feeling, so much history. He's reflecting on, the life he had with his wife, with a best friend. And the author is a doctoral student, and her studies are on masculinity norms in the rural far north. But she was also very inspired to write this because of the notes that she found and from her grandfather's home care team. Towards the end of his life. So it's just beautifully told, and it's a paperback, and I hope you'll look for it. Some of you may remember this amazing film. Gosh, what was it? Maybe early 80s. I can't quite remember. The Whale Rider. So Penguin Classics, which I'm always so proud to talk about. What a great classic series. It has is bringing out The Whale Rider both in paperback and in hardcover. It's a coming of age modern classic. And it, inspired the film, which starred actress Keisha Castle Hughes. So these are special editions. We've got contributions by Dr. Lorianne Roy, who was the first Native American president of the American Library Association when she was inaugurated in 2007. And we also have a foreword by the actress Lily Gladstone. So this is the story of 8-year-old Kahu. She craves her grandfather's love, respect, attention. He's really focused on being the chief of the Maori tribe in Wangara on the east coast of New Zealand. So this is my second New Zealand book I'm talking about today. And this tribe descends from the legendary whale rider. In every generation since the whale rider, a male has inherited the title of chief. Now there is no male heir, and there's only Kahu. She should be next in line for the title, but her great grandfather is blinded by tradition. He sees no use for a girl, but she has the gift, and so the story unfolds from there. It's really great, beautiful. And now we have a new series. I mean, this is a standalone novel, but Riverhead, which is one of our most international imprints at Penguin Random House, they do just fabulous, mainly fiction. This is part of the first in their new initiative to bring translations of Chinese writers, current Chinese, contemporary Chinese writers to America. So here we're entering the world of an elite Chinese couple, their life of wealth, luxury, around the clock service, which includes their trusted nanny, Yu Ling. But slipping in and out of the shadows, Yu Ling, although she's meticulous in her care of their only son and has served the family for years, she knows their secrets, and she has secrets of her own. The family becomes subject to a government investigation, and their fortunes crumble. The nanny is left to make a series of life-changing choices, and how far will she go to claim her due? So that's the first of these great Chinese translations. And I love that Mo Yan, who won the Nobel Prize, gave Women Seated such a fantastic review. And next is Fonseca. So this is really a fascinating novel. It's born of almost an obsession that the author has with the English author Penelope Fitzgerald, who never really, Penelope Fitzgerald, Jessica Frances Kane learned, had a real life journey to Mexico with her son in search of a much needed inheritance in the 1950s, in 1952. Penelope Fitzgerald never wrote about this, but our author, Jessica, has investigated it, and written a novel around this journey with some reimaginings for sure, but also based on some documents that she's found. So at the time, Penelope Fitzgerald's husband is a struggling alcoholic. They have a literary journal that's on the brink. She's pregnant with their third child. She receives this letter from two elderly sisters named Delaney, who are distant relations with a silver mine in Mexico. They're dangling the possibility of an inheritance, which the family very much needs. So in the story, Penelope Fitzgerald leaves her 2-year-old son Tina with relatives, sails for New York with her 6-year-old in tow, and then they are led into a situation where they are vying for this inheritance, trying to figure out what's happening. The the visitors to the house in Mexico include Edward Hopper. So it's based on a true story and based on Penelope Fitzgerald's life. And if you haven't read Penelope Fitzgerald, she has, oh my gosh, wonderful books. The Bookshop is probably her most famous, but this is, part of novelists looking into, retellings of whether it's a classic novel like we have with James and Percival Everett or based on a writer's life. I think it's a really amazing premise here. And Buckeye is also a debut novel. This took 8 years to write. It's a multi-generational novel about two families in a small Ohio town called Bon Ami. And it traces how their lives intersect from World War II on. I think it would be great for fans going way back to Wallace Stegner or Anne Patchett. I'm going to just read you from the author's letter that was provided to the sales reps. He says, I set out with the intention of writing a novel about a woman in a small town living two lives, the one she has out in the open with her family and the one she maintains in secret with her lover, and the challenges of that as the years unfold. But after months of note-taking, when I looked for a way to begin the story, I was surprised to find myself wanting to start with her lover, the man across town. I soon realized the novel would be about him as much as it would be about her. It would be about their respective families and how their lives become intertwined with secrecy. Buckeye explores the repercussions of deceit and betrayal and the winding, sometimes impossible paths we have to travel on our way to making amends. And Tom Hanks, and the fact that Tom Hanks has read it makes me think there's probably a movie in the works. He reviewed it. He said, I've been yearning for years for a novel that connects the American generations who dealt with our two wars, one of Omaha Beach, the other of the La Drang Valley. Buckeye is that book, and it soars. So here is a major book that we're publishing in the fall, in September, Ian McEwan's next novel. It really harkens back to the amazing novel that Atonement was. It's a speculative fiction. It's speculative fiction set 100 years in the future in a drowned world that looks back, see if you can follow me, that looks back to 2014 and the beginning of the climate collapse. With, like I said, it's got the sweep of Atonement, but the novel centers around a lost poem written for the main character's wife's birthday party. The birthday party is the opening scene of this novel. And we meet in the novel scholars that are in the future, in the 22nd century, as they're contemplating their past, which is our present. So much depends in this novel on the discovery of the poem that may or may not physically exist. The catastrophe, the climate catastrophe that has occurred in this world of this novel is called the Great Inundation, and it transformed the face of the earth. So Ian McEwan has said about this novel, my ambition was to let the past, present, and future address each other across the barriers of time. I've written a novel about a quest, a crime, revenge, fame, a tangled love affair, mental illness, love of nature and poetry, and how through all natural and self-inflicted catastrophes, we have the knack of surviving. So there may be some hope in this novel. I don't know if you've read or discovered Patricia Lockwood. She is a character. we first published her book of poetry, Motherland, Fatherland, Homeland Sexuals. Then her memoir, Priest Daddy, about her father, living with her father, who's a priest. And then her very contemporary novel, No One Is Talking About This, that was a Booker Prize finalist, won the Dylan Thomas Prize. And is about social media and young people. It's a really fascinating book. But now she has Will There Ever Be Another You, which is about a woman's descent into illness and insanity. It's set amid a global pandemic. One young woman is trying to keep the pieces together of her family, stunned by devastating loss, and her mind left mangled and misfiring from a mystifying disease. She's afraid of her floorboards. And the song, What is Love? Baby Don't Hurt Me, plays over and over in her ears. She hates her friends, or more accurately, she doesn't know who they even are. So has the illness stolen her old mind and given her a new one? The very weave of herself seems to have loosened, and her time and memories pass straight through her body. She writes things like this: I'm sorry not to respond to your email, but I live completely in the present now. Um, what a cover too. So, as I said, she's a best-selling author. You may have read some of her reviews and pieces in the New York Times, the New Yorker. She writes for the London Review of Books. She's one of our most interesting, imaginative, raw authors. Oh, and third place books. I included that quote from Rafe Posey about how much they love the novel. One of Seattle's own, Elizabeth George, in her 22nd Inspector Thomas Lindley novel, Detective Inspector. This is publishing in tandem with a reboot from the favorite series on BritBox. The reboot Lindley should be coming out about the same time as this next mystery. Here, Michael Lobb has been found dead on the floor of his family's tin and pewter workshop. It's suspicious enough that his body was found by a representative of Cornwall Eco Mining, which is a company keen on acquiring his family's land. And so there are lots of characters in here that raise cause for suspicion. We have Detective Lindley and Detective Sergeant Barbara Havers brought in to help solve the crime and search for justice in a community that seems to be corrupt, where lust, greed, and family traditions are colliding with devastating consequences. And turning to our nonfiction, this is based on a true story, obviously. It's an Indie Next, great reviews. It's the harrowing true story of a young couple who were shipwrecked at sea, Maurice and Marilyn. And there is a book, I think, published in the UK, just called Maurice and Marilyn. This isn't the exact same book, I don't think. This is their story, though, of running away from it all in 1972. Maurice is an obsessive loner. His wife, Marilyn, is charismatic and ambitious, and they drop out of society. They set sail, and for nearly a year, it all went well until deep in the Pacific, a breaching whale knocked a hole in their boat and it sank. So what ensues is this jaw-dropping fight for survival in the wild ocean with little hope of rescue. They're alone together for months in a tiny rubber raft. There's a photo of the rubber raft that they lived in. They're starving, they're exhausted. They start to, you know, fight, and their inner demons come out, and their marriage is put to a great test. Patrick Rading Keefe, who's just one of our best nonfiction writers, says it's a dazzling book. And this is one of the library reads books for July. It's the CIA Book Club. This is something I did not know about, and maybe some of you did not as well. But for nearly 5 decades after the Second World War, the Iron Curtain, which divided Europe, there was no physical the Cold War. There was no physical combat that would take place along this frontier, but the risk of nuclear annihilation was too high, was so high. Instead, the war was fought psychologically. It was a battle for hearts, minds, and intellects. Few understood this more clearly than George Minden. He was the head of a covert intelligence operation known as the CIA Book Program. This aimed to undermine Soviet censorship and inspire revolt by offering different visions of thought and culture. From its Manhattan headquarters, Minden's book club secretly sent 10 million banned titles into the East. Nowhere were the books more welcomed than in Poland, where they would circulate covertly among circles of like-minded readers, quietly making the case against Soviet communism. So by the late 1980s, illicit literature was so pervasive in Poland that censorship broke down. The Iron Curtain soon followed. Charlie English narrates this tale of Cold War spycraft, smuggling, and secret printing operations for the first time, highlighting the work of a handful of extraordinary people who fought for intellectual freedom. So it's quite topical as well. And there I included a list of some of the books that were part of this dispersal of the CIA book club. And this is The Aviator and the Showman is the first new Amelia Earhart biography in almost 30 years. It draws from a treasure trove of news sources, including undiscovered audio interviews. So in 1928, a young social worker and hobby pilot named Amelia Earhart arrived in the office of George Putnam of Putnam Books, which is part of Penguin Random House. Um, he was heir to the Putnam and Sons throne and publishing hitmaker. He was on the hunt for the right woman for a secret flying mission across the Atlantic. This was a partnership, professional and soon otherwise. This is the time in which that relationship was born. So The Aviator and the Showman unveils this untold story of Amelia's decade-long marriage to George Palmer Putnam. It offers this intimate exploration of their relationship and the role it played in her legacy. And despite her outwardly modest and humble image, we know her to have been a fierce, a feminist, driven, brave, a real trailblazer, obviously, in her personal and professional life. And Putnam was the so-called P.T. Barnum of publishing. He was a visionary in publishing, but he often pushed his authors, this is hard to imagine, to extreme lengths in the name of publicity, in especially Amelia, who he pressured to do more and more treacherous stunts to promote her books. And this influenced a certain recklessness that led up to her final flight. So this is a totally cinematic account. Our author emphasizes Earhart's multifaceted human side, her struggles, the truth behind her brave pursuits, and the compromises she made to fit into societal expectations. It's totally passionate tale of adventure with colorful characters, and this vivid portrait of this marriage, unlike it's ever been told before. This is really topical about Iran. It's the history of the Iranian Revolution. King of Kings, Scott Anderson is a fantastic writer, probably most well known before this for his book Lawrence in Arabia. So here, think of New Year's Eve 1977, when on a state visit to Iran, President Jimmy Carter toasted Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, King of Kings, Light of the Aryans, Shadow of God on Earth, praising Iran as an island of stability. He says, due to your leadership and the respect and admiration and love which your people give to you. 14 months later, the Shah flees Iran into exile, forced from the throne by this volcanic religious revolution led by the Ayatollah Khomeini. So here, Scott Anderson gives us this history lesson about Iran that's really more relevant than ever. It's a story of American diplomatic blunders and miscalculations that led to the loss of a vital ally and the beginning of hostilities that have plagued the world for nearly 4 decades. It takes us inside the fortified walls of the Shah's palaces, and reveals what led to the Shah's demise, the hostage crisis, and certainly the radical theocracy that has reshaped the Middle East. George Takei, he is such a fabulous author and person and actor. This is the icon's untold story. We knew him as Sulu in Star Trek. He's quite an activist, an internet personality, and one of our most iconic gay public figures. In It Rhymes with Takai, finally, the story of his life is revealed. He was in the closet into, I think it was the age of 68. Yes, it's there on the screen. So this is the same group of illustrators and collaborators that produced They Called Us Enemy, which was about George's internment during World War II. And I think people are just going to flock to it. And another classic here was Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And now we have a long-awaited book from one of the most influential spiritual teachers of this last century, Shunryu Suzuki Roshi, the beloved author of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, sharing really simple and warm-hearted teachings just to sit, a practice of deeply connecting with how it feels to be alive in your surroundings, whether on a meditation cushion or not, stepping forward from that connection to opening to your life wherever you are, finding the right deep well of innate wisdom, compassion, and care. And I love the Naomi Shihab Nye quote. I think this will be very inspirational and calming at a time when I think we really need it. Summer of Our Discontent is a unique and definitely unique book from Thomas Chatterton Williams. It's provocative. He's one of the most revered and reviled social commentators of our time. This paints a clear and detailed picture from his perspective of the evolving mores and manners and taboos of social justice, including anti-racism, ideas and events that have changed its meaning, the meaning of social justice. He takes aim at the ideology of critical race theory, the rise of an oppressive social media, the fall from Obama to Trump, and the twin crises of COVID-19 and the murder of George Floyd. He's documenting the extent to which the transition has altered media, artistic creativity, education, employment, policing, and most profoundly, the ambient language and culture we use to make sense of our lives. He's decrying how liberalism, the very foundation of an open and vibrant society, is in existential crises under assault from both the right and the left. And his previous book with us was called Losing My Cool, which was kind of a letter to his son about literature. And yeah, he's quite the independent thinker and a fantastic writer. My poetry book I wanted to talk to you about, that just went on sale, that's just should be available in the library, is by Garrett Hongo, who's written many volumes of poetry, but this is my favorite. So this is his fourth book, actually, and he teaches at University of Oregon, where my daughter goes to school. He teaches English there. He's a Japanese American poet who actually grew up not too far from me in Gardena, California. This is exploring his family's ancestry in Hawaii, where he lived till he was, I think, about 10 years old before he moved to Gardena. It talks about the 20th and 21st century. The poems include rhapsodies on Motown, youthful memories, imagism, ideograms, the Watts Writers Workshop, which was such a seminal influence here in Los Angeles and nationally. it's just full of so many rich and varied experiences in places, like I said, from the West Coast to Hawaii, Italy, Shakespeare and Company in Paris. It's just exciting. They're prose poems, and so I just feel that they would be a great introduction for somebody who, likes to read uh, short prose about lives and experiences. And he has a wonderful perspective, beautiful language. So a couple of books coming out in the fall that I think everyone's ex are definitely we're all excited about at Penguin Random House is Elizabeth Gilbert. Firstly, Elizabeth Gilbert's new memoir, which is quite the surprise, All the Way to the River. So, uh, this kind of combines what we Big Magic, which was about wisdom and inspiration and creativity and living beyond fear and full of her, wonderful stories and anecdotes. And of course, Eat, Pray, Love, which is, I think, remains her most famous book still. Uh, it combines those two. And it really is about this love story. Let's see. So, what if your most beautiful love story turned into your biggest nightmare? That's the question this book asks. What if the dear friend who taught you so much about your self-destructive tendencies became the unstable partner with whom you disastrously reenacted every one of them? And what if your most devastating heartbreak opened a pathway to your greatest awakening? So in 2000, Elizabeth Gilbert met Rhea. They became friends, then best friends, then inseparable. But when tragedy entered their lives, the truth was finally laid bare. The two were in love. They were also a pair of addicts on a collision course toward catastrophe. So this also has Elizabeth Gilbert's illustrations, which she's never had in a book as far as I know. And just kind of a revelation of chaotic thinking, addictive thinking, obsessions, but she's also always clear-eyed in the end. This is a little part on the screen of a poem that I found in there, which I thought was pretty interesting. So there you go with Elizabeth Gilbert's book coming in September, and really excited about Margaret Atwood's memoir, which I don't think she ever necessarily thought she'd write a memoir. But when her husband of nearly 50 years, Graham, passed away in 2019, I think there was a shift in her. And so she is definitely ready to look back on her life. I mean, she's still very active. Um, so this is long awaited, in her own words, of course. She had a charmed childhood. Her father was an entomologist, and the family lived for 6 months a year in Canada's boreal forest. She had it was unconventional and certainly was foundational to the creative, imaginative thinker that she is. This unfolds as the story of her life, linking these seminal moments to the books that have shaped our literary landscape, from the cruel year that spawned Cat's Eye to the Orwellian 1980s Berlin, where she wrote The Handmaid's Tale in pages, bursting with bohemian gatherings and her magical life with the wildly charismatic writer Graham Gibson. Also, major political turning points. We meet poets, bears, Hollywood actors, larger than life characters, straight from the pages of an Atwood novel. Covers more than 50 years, includes over 50 never be seen photos, diary entries, even house plans. It's also a totally rare look into the golden days of publishing. And this year, we've got the final season of The Handmaid's Tale, which I just finished and is fabulous. And then the 40th anniversary of The Handmaid's Tale. And my daughter, who's about to turn 21, is reading The Edible Woman. I mean, her novels are still getting new readers all the time. I loved Hagseed, which is a retelling of The Tempest, her book of poetry. I mean, she's just, one of our very best. So there you go. And hi, Sam.
Wow. So that was phenomenal, and I have some good news and bad news. The good news is that was a phenomenal roundup of books to come, and I'm sure you're going to have an incredibly exciting year ahead.
Yeah.
Um, the bad news is that, first of all, holds on these books have started to blow up on the Seattle Public Library website.
Oh,
So
good.
that's because our attendees, as they've been listening to you speak, have been logging on, placing holds. The other bit of bad news is it is going to limit us a little bit for questions,
Oh, yeah.
although we don't actually have a technical cutoff at one. So for any of the attendees who want to stay beyond then, we can go a few minutes beyond and get some of these questions in. But some people have a hard stop at one, and so if they drop off, we'll just let them do that. One observation I know so many friends who are authors who tend to talk about their books a little bit like their kids. But I know that you never ask anybody who your favorite kid is, so I certainly don't do that. But it strikes me that publishers are a little bit like, I don't know, are you a godmother? Are you a fairy godmother? You've got 100 books out here, kind of thing. How do you relate to them, do you think?
Are you asking how do I read all the books that
How do you read, and how do you relate to what's your feeling about these books? Do you feel what's the analogy that you would use to it, if the analogy for an author is that it's like a parent with a couple of children or more if they've written a whole bunch of books?
Yeah, so I don't know what analogy I would have, but I'll tell you what, that the job is so fresh because we've got this new season. I've been working for, I started in 1995, so we're talking 30 years at this point. And it just feels like a new job all the time because of all of these incredible new books. And we are not, assigned really. We get to read what we want. I mean, sometimes there's a really big book. We have sales conference next week, and we're all going to read this one novel for sure. But there's, clearly a lot of freedom, and we all have different proclivities. I will say, in my with my colleagues, I'm one of the only one that's like the true believer about poetry. So I try and
Yeah.
mitigate that a little bit because I don't want to be obnoxious. Uh, so I feel like um, a, my mom had this phrase, and it really does apply, a black belt dilettante. So I know a little bit about a lot of things, and then I know deeply, of course, the books that I choose. Now, Seattle Public, this is amazing because I get to pick books that not only I think that attendees want to hear about, but because, my book presentations for certain library systems are different. I know that some libraries have a lot more like romance readers and mystery. So, I'm not trying to be an intellectual snob about any of that, but I have always felt that this particular group likes literary, deep nonfiction. I could be wrong. Everyone wants to escape sometimes. But anyway, so yes, we all have favorite books, but I feel like the thing that it's fresh all the time, and I'm a black belt dilettante, except when it comes to poetry.
Love that analogy, especially for me as a journalist. I feel like you become a dilettante in a million things. And the amazing thing also about being a journalist is sometimes you never quite know what you're going to write about from day to day. But
Yeah.
at the end of a given day, you may have learned so much about something that you now know more than most people in the world, but it's a totally fresh subject to you. So
Right. Yeah.
um,
And I mean, the
and
same is true of working in a library or a bookstore. I mean, you just get exposed to so
absolutely.
many ideas and stories, and I just would recommend it for everyone, you know?
Well, I also I love your what you're saying about poetry. I feel like poetry is a little bit like sort of the eccentric child who doesn't always relate well with everybody, but is like incredibly interesting in their own right. James Reston of the New York Times used to say this many years ago. He said, "Americans will do anything for poetry except read it,"
Oh, that is
and
Yes.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a truly special thing when a book of poetry, connects.
Yeah, well,
I
Mary
also want to,
Oliver has done that, and
yes,
Ada Limon, and
yes,
I mean, we have our
absolutely.
national poets, really.
Yep. Yep.
So,
I also loved the idea that for many of these books, they're already out there with sort of nice comments from other authors. Some have already been reviewed in the popular press. The New York Times reviewed that book, A Marriage at Sea, the other day
oh,
and gave it a rave
oh,
review.
good, good. I didn't
Oh,
see that review.
it's a
I'll look for it.
fascinating review, and it I think anybody in the audience who's married, regardless of how much you love your spouse, or maybe less than love your spouse, you have to contemplate the idea of being stuck in a raft in the middle of the Pacific with your spouse, could be your best friend, for whatever number of months it was. It was kind of insane. And one of the things the review points out is that during this time, they actually had several freighter ships that passed them nearby, and they did everything they could
Could not get
to
the
wave the
attention.
ship in, but they didn't have a flare, a working flare, or maybe the flares had become too soggy and didn't work, and they didn't have a mirror in their emergency kit, and a mirror is
Mm,
supposed to reflect the sun. But anyways, a number of ships went by before one actually noticed them. So,
yeah.
yeah, that book is fascinating.
And the
The
Amelia
other quick,
Earhart book, I was going to say, like,
oh God,
learning about that, the idea of doing flying stunts to promote books. I mean, it's just
well,
her
does
books.
does I mean, but it's not just that; it's her husband, if I
Yeah.
heard you correctly, is pushing her to
Yes.
do more and more out there things in order to promote the
So
book
that's
and
another
promote
marriage
herself.
story in the air and
That
in the
No, that
ocean.
is a marriage story. I mean, my God, and
I know.
that also just seems like that is going to be a movie of with just enormous implications kind of in
Yeah.
it. So, one other quick thing I wanted to ask you, that based on a couple of questions that have come in, LA, the Southern California area, is sort of an interesting literary community. It's a little bit kind of spread out. It's
Yep.
sometimes not as centrifugal maybe as a place like New York is, or even Seattle. Seattle's a
And
very
San Francisco.
literary place, but people come together for these events at our library. They come together to Elliott Bay Books. But Southern California has also been through the tragedy of the fires in the
Yeah.
last year, and I wonder, in a place like Malibu where you live, or in Pacific Palisades, what it's done to the literary community, what it's done to people, that hosted book groups, and then all of a sudden wind up without houses. Are people doing virtual book groups? Is literature more important than ever to connect to for them?
Um, yes, I always will say that literature's just so, yeah, I'm in a book club. None of my members lost their houses, but the highway was closed for a long time. People have been very much displaced. And I feel that everybody's very needy for each other. I went to an event it's called Soho House. It was an author that lives here, River's Daughter. It's getting a lot of attention. Anyway, her memoir, I went to that, and there were more people there than I expected for a Malibu event, because people are really not just with books and bookstores and reading groups. And I mean, it's like the pandemic was, we thought that reading and all of that would be, so hurt. Quite the contrary. Bookstore, the sales of books, we sold so many books. Libraries rose to the occasion, so people will like find each other to talk about books. But yes, I mean, there were cancellations and all of that. The highways reopened. Our poet laureate had to cancel some really important events, but um, people are grouping together, and so I have hope. But yeah, we lost a library. Our bookstores, all our retail is totally struggling. Malibu Village Books that's here has sent out, GoFundMe's. It's not been easy, but I don't see. so much the virtual stuff. It's a lot of driving that people have to do, a lot more driving.
Finally, to one other book that you brought up, I think it was called the CIA Book Club, about
Yeah,
sending all those books into the Eastern Europe. That is actually a wonderful segue in a way to what our library does and what the Public Library Foundation, Seattle Public Library Foundation, attempts to do with its supporting unbanned books
yeah,
program, and we've made it possible for any kid around the country to get a Seattle Public Library card and have access to books that they may not have access to in their where they live,
yeah.
and that's just one of a whole bunch of programs that the library does. I did get a wonderful question. It'll sound like I, as a member of the board, wrote this question, but I promise I didn't. But what the question is here that came in was, I love that this webinar was free and that it's open to all. Can you share how donors help support programs like this and the impact it has on the community? And I know that in Seattle, we have just an incredibly great donor base and people who support their library not only with their advocacy, not only with their tax dollars, but through contributions, and have allowed us to do a million great programs, and to do programs like this, to bring in a number of wonderful authors in the course of a year. And I hope and trust you have the same thing in Southern California.
We
We had a couple.
do. And Penguin Random Houses has been involved in a lot of you know, legal situations with banned and challenged books. So we're super active. One of our executives got an award for it, and so yeah, I love the work that you do, and libraries are just so important. I also wanted to mention, because I wanted to at the tip top of this, but we still have some people on the line, that I was so delighted to know, Sam, that you are one of our authors. So you have a book with Avery called Jet Age, and it's what the history of.
Basically the
Tell
race
us.
to create the first jet airliner. So it's got a lot
Yeah.
of the Boeing 707 in it, and its competitor was a British plane called the Comet, which was actually the first jet airliner, but was tragically flawed.
Uh,
And so Boeing managed to kind of sweep in and win the race. Although Boeing's under a little bit of distress these days against
yes.
Airbus and trying
Yeah.
to
No, I think that's a
get its
very
reputation
interesting
back.
history.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'll look into that.
Well, unfortunately, we do need to wrap up. But
Yep.
again, I really, really appreciate your being with us. One housekeeping item: I hope that the three people who are the winners of our random contest and who were selected at random, Dietrich Segar, Meredith Merritt, Don Rooney. I hope you all are still on the line. Know that you're a winner, and you'll get uh, your booty, as it were. I'm not sure exactly how we get it to you, but we'll
I
let you know.
send it. I send it.
Also,
Codes
from
with
good,
books. Yep.
wonderful, and our leader, Brian Lawrence, our CEO, just popped in a note, said thank you all for attending. Thank you to Liz for your amazing recommendations, and thanks to everyone for attending. This was a great. We had almost 100 people at one point, and
Yay.
that's really a great show up.
Oh,
So,
thanks so much. I'll do it
all
again.
right, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Liz.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Bye bye.